Friends, it is a great joy for me this morning to welcome Judy Puchalski to share a word of testimony and to reflect on the ways that in her life she has moved from bread and cup to faith and giving, as she testifies to the way that God has been moving in her life. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. It's always so gorgeous from here. It's like I feel like this is my annual visit up here. Because I think this is the third time I've spoken in 7 years being a member. But anyway, thank you, Allison, and the Stewardship Committee for the opportunity to speak with you again. I've been a member of Saugatuck for over 7 years, and even though I do not call Connecticut my permanent home any longer, I do not intend to leave Saugatuck. It means that much to me. I now live in Nashville, but frequently make trips to this area. Many of you have followed my story since the first time I spoke in the sanctuary in 2015. I had been through a series of traumatic experiences that changed my life forever. It was during that time I decided to go back to church, yet having been raised Roman Catholic and attending 16 years of Roman Catholic education, I felt it was time to look for something different. Saugatuck met that need, and when I needed it most, the church has always been there for me to lean on whenever I needed. Okay, without going over all of those details, I'll add something that many of you don't know about, and as to what else was happening behind the scenes. As my sister's health continued to falter, our financial picture seemed to be drying up as well. When we initially purchased our home in Norwalk, it was with the understanding that we both had good-paying jobs as we attempted to afford all the expenses that would be coming. We were both financial professionals and both had promising careers. When she became gravely ill in 2014, all of those thoughts began to fade. She could no longer hold a full-time job and eventually was unable to work at all, and the only option was for her to go on permanent disability at a fraction of what she normally made in salary. The bulk of the expenses as well as her care fell directly on me. I explained to her early on that we couldn't linger in the house, it was just too expensive. But her condition and my need to work feverishly to keep up with the bills, it didn't allow us time or energy to move forward and to actually move. I saw all of my life savings diminish slowly. And now you have to follow dates here a little bit. By Thanksgiving of 2019, I was having problems paying for food. I came to speak to Pastor Allison not in an effort to receive financial help, but to discuss the stress that I was under. In return, I received a gift card and a check from her discretionary fund to tide me over. Other friends helped, but I never forgot how the church helped me at this time of need. Many members are not aware that there's a discretionary fund here that the pastor has. That's something that I think needs to be rectified. People need to understand that. Allison can decide on her own when she gives to someone. And that person may be the person sitting right next to you, okay? You do not know what that person's going through. And many people who sat next to me through all those years had no idea what was happening. It's not something discussed, and I segued off my notes. So over the next year, I struggled through with the help of friends and the church. By January of 2021, I was at my wit's end. COVID had struck, and a high school classmate of mine was the first to succumb to the disease. And then my good friend Holly Wheeler had passed away from the virus in December. Nothing positive was happening. Some friends worried if I would ever get through this. Then on January 24th, I received more bad news. A good friend of mine from a networking group that I'd been a part of for many years, had passed away from leukemia. I was shaken, but this is where the story begins to change dramatically. Somewhere, someone had said enough. You see, this friend owned a small business. He had come to a meeting, we met weekly, 7 years prior, and said, most of you don't know this, but my small business is part of a publicly held company. and that I own, and I'm looking for new investors. I went home and thought about it. At the time, I wasn't destitute. And I had $6,000 sitting uninvested in an online investment account where I would invest small amounts here and there. I went to look at his stock, and it was selling for 0.0001 a share. That is 1/100th of a penny. Let me just take a step back a second. My investment dream always, okay, no matter what pundits say and whatever, was if I could buy a large amount of shares at a really cheap price, if that stock moved at all, I would make more cash. So I bit the bullet. I bought 60 million shares, okay? Not many people would do that, okay, I admit. And I waited, but I always felt I did my friend a favor. For years, the stock did nothing, and I found it nearly impossible to sell. I did manage to unload 10 million at one point at a loss. So my friend passes away on January 24th. And on Friday, January 29th, I was headed to a job that I absolutely hated. I worked for myself, but I would have to take these part-time jobs, and it was horrible. And I thought, well, that stock is probably worthless now. I got to work and logged into my account, and my life changed forever. Suffice it to say, and if you want to know those details, come to me afterwards. I'll tell you. I'll be happy to tell you. Suffice it to say, I was set for life. And I'll just tell you a funny story. I called my brother up, and I said, Greg, do me a favor. Go to some finance. Go to your computer. Go to some finance. Pull these letters up and tell me what you see. And he told me, and I said, I have 50 million shares. He says, you mean 50,000? I said, no, Greg, you hear me right. I heard 50 million. And he's like, what? He's like, what? What is it? What is that amount? Because you're dealing in decimals. But anyway, he knows now. And now I needed to properly thank those that helped me. I connected with Allison to set up a Zoom call to tell her what had happened and to explain that I wanted to give back. I made an immediate donation to the pastor's discretionary fund, and then asked what else I could do, and she dutifully told me all the options. I decided to consider the options and slept on it until 4 a.m. the following morning. And this is an actual email I wrote to Allison on the following morning. There is no doubt in my mind that I was given this wonderful gift for a reason. Ever since joining Saugatuck, my spirituality has blossomed. Hard to understand, but I just seem to know things. And I realize that spirituality is an underpinning for so many members here. I believe this is what draws us here. Here's what happened after we spoke. I thought about the many separate projects that we spoke of, and of the ways that I can help. And after a few calls with friends, I fell asleep until 3 a.m. And then with total clarity, I woke up at 4 a.m., and I knew exactly what I had to do. The first thing that I did was the stewardship at that point was a little behind in what was needed. So I filled that to what they needed. And then I wrote, I would like to pay for the sound systems for both the sanctuary and Hoskins Hall. I would like this to be a public gift to the church as follows. I should remain anonymous, but the gift can be made public in honor of Holly Wheeler. It seems so poignant to me that Holly loved to sing more than anything else. The sound system seems so very fitting for that honor. And I would like her family to know this as well, again, without them knowing it was me. And I asked for one thing. I said, can we have that sound system working by Holly's service? And it actually was. And then there was like a moving target as to the amount. And the amount, I think, ended up probably close to double what we originally talked about. God certainly works in mysterious ways. I was given this not to hoard, or to leave for generations to come that I will never know. It is a gift meant to be shared now, and I cannot think of a better place for me or a better life for me right now, but to have the honor of and joy of giving. Just a note about Holly. I got to know Holly through various groups at Saugatuck. She was a determined person with a knack for coming and going to different churches and, quote, trying them out. She did this for 30 years. She sat at the women's spirituality meeting and proudly proclaimed to me that she would never become a member of a church. About a year before she passed from COVID, she proudly became a member of Saugatuck. There's a photo that you probably have seen of her on that day. She looks so radiant and so happy. Much of the work that she did in order to make the transition was with the help of Allison through weekly emails. I think it was weekly, right? This alone is a great testimony to Allison's work behind the scenes, the work we may never recognize or see. The job of a pastor is often to serve quietly, yet serve with the best interest of the community in mind. Recently, I was asked by Allison to come forward as the donor of the sound system. And I've stayed anonymous up until now because out of caution. I just didn't want people to know necessarily. But recently, I entered into a grant agreement with my Catholic high school in the Bronx that I went to an all-girls school to help them build a new gymnasium. And I agreed for a number of reasons to be public about it. And one of the things that they were so excited about was that they said, it's an all-girls school. And they said, you know, one thing that we have trouble doing is having people to show and say, look, this is somebody, this is a real person. This is a real person who is doing good. And they're so excited about that. So that's kind of helping. That's kind of moving along. It's going to take a while. But so now's the right time for me to be honest with you because that's going to be out there. I'm humbled and honored to have been able to give the gift to the church. I want to just briefly segue to another point that has to do with giving in general. And I have a unique perspective of this because of the change in my life. As many of you know, for 15 years, I ran my own bookkeeping business and worked for myself. So during these years, I met some wonderful people, and many of them became lifelong friends. With each of these clients, I was able to get into a glimpse of their financial picture, whether it be for their businesses or for them personally, because a lot of it kind of goes into the other. Their successes, their disappointments, their struggles. In many cases, issues that affected the business also affected what they were doing financially. Each of these clients had their own story, their own background with money. Some grew up around money, had abundance all the time. Others were self-made. All were very protective and wanted to continue to protect what they worked so hard to maintain. I was honored and fortunate to expand, in some cases, to assisting them on the personal side. I learned many things. When my personal situation changed, I actually feared going to a financial planner. My experience had taught me something, and I'm just going to tell you one story. So I had an 82-year-old, very wealthy man in Stamford, living on the water for many years. And he had a long relationship with his financial planner. But as he aged, the planner began to, what I'll say, control everything he did with his money. To the point where my client would say to me very often, I'm going broke. I'm running out of money. I can't tell you what that does to someone who's aging. It took all his happiness out of life. And no matter what I said about what this financial planner was doing, you see, financial planners make money based on commissions, based on what they hold of your money. So the more they hold, it's self-serving. So you have to be very careful about who you go to. But I wanted to say, the reason I bring this up is because when I decided I needed my own, here are my findings. Many of the goals of planners is to build and preserve wealth. This is fine, but then sometimes it gets out of hand. They feel that they control your money more than you. It's your money. If you find yourself in a situation where a planner is not listening to your wishes, remember the funds are yours, not theirs. Do not allow them to sway your deepest passions and desires for doing good, for giving to worthwhile organizations. I don't know if you know this. I was trying to find numbers, but apparently most of the donations given in this country are given by middle-class people, not by the wealthy. And I really believe a lot of that is because the wealthy are stuck in planning situations where they can't take from it. And I needed to go through to another financial planner for just that reason. You don't listen to me, I'm just not keeping my money with you. And finally, think now about the giving that you give to our church. COVID took a great toll on the ability of the church to continue financially healthy. I'm asking that you look carefully at your own personal financial picture and consider to up your donation as you feel that you can. I'm not asking you to take from future generations or to sway your dreams. I just ask that you consider the joy that this church brings you and the blessings that it gives the entire community. Please increase your support to the community, to your community church. We work together as one, to live together as one. We must stay together as one and work through the issues of the church and recognize that we are all working for one common goal. From bread and cup to faith and giving, we are one in that common goal. Thank you.